It's Q&A day, and it's all about what can go very right and very wrong for the Colts this offseason. Let's get to it.
You are Locked On Colts, your daily Indianapolis Colts podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to Locked On Colts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the number one podcast network in all the land. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. It's the last call for football on FanDuel. If you're a new customer, bet just $5 and get $200 in bonus bets if you win that bet. What is up, everybody? Good morning. This is Jake Arthur, Indianapolis Colts beat writer for Roundtable Sports. And today, it's been a few weeks, so we wanted to go ahead and cast the net back out to you guys for some Q&A. It's obviously the offseason. The Super Bowl is this week. Draft talk and free agency is really starting to pick up, especially for teams like the Colts who never were in the playoffs to begin with. The Senior Bowl was last week, so there's a lot to talk about, really. So we're going to go ahead and open the floor here. We threw the net out on social media for everyone to send their questions in. So let's get into it. So the first one is from David Whiteley on Facebook. I know DeForest Buckner and Grover Stewart are getting up there in age and health. Do you prioritize defensive tackle over defensive end this offseason? And if so, who? So I've thought a lot about this one since I looked at the question, and I really can't put one over the other right now. Because if you look at both positions, they're both kind of in a similar boat right now because of what you've got under contract in 2026 and then the depth that's not there under contract anymore. I don't necessarily know that you can prioritize one over the other. Now, football people will always tell you that if you've got interior pass rush, that's always a huge benefit for you. And that's where you get, DeForest Buckner has always been a huge asset and everything. But right now on the edge, Laiatu Latu and JT Tuimoloau are the only defensive ends who are under contract for next year that have really had any cachet this year. Darrell Nchami is as well, but he was a practice squad call-up a few times over the course of the year. So that's kind of, you can't really hang your hat on that. And then you do have DeForest Buckner and Grover Stewart on the inside, but they're both going to be 32 to start the year. And DeForest Buckner obviously had the neck injury in the back half of the season. And then you do have Adetomiwa Adebawore, which is good. He's coming off a career year, but I don't think you're really ready for him to be a starter quite yet, obviously. And then Neville Gallimore is a free agent as well. So all things considered, I think you just have to throw a ton of resources through free agency and the draft at both spots on the interior and the edge. Now, David also asked whether you prioritize whichever one, who do you want? So if we're just looking at defensive tackle here, which is the one where people probably don't know quite as many names. If you're looking at free agency, John Franklin Myers from the Broncos has been a big part of that really good defense this year. So that is the type of guy where he's a veteran. He's closing in on 30, but he's not. I think he's still in his prime. He's still playing really good football. And you're also at the point now where you can sign a guy who I think at this point you can offer him somewhat starting reps or like a significant role because you're not throwing Buckner and Stewart out there for 50, 60 plays a game anymore. You know what I mean? You need a solid rotation. And I think whoever goes out there, you can't really take the foot off the gas. So Neville Gallimore, we've talked about that. I would re-sign him. From the exterior, John Franklin Myers is a good one. DJ Wanham from the Panthers. He was a part of them turning around their defense this year. And then Sheldon Rankins from the Texans. He seems to be on kind of the rental portion of his career where he's just going somewhere for 1-year deals every year, but he's still playing at a high level, giving you good 3-tech reps there. So Sheldon Rankins is a guy who I've always felt would eventually get his way to the Colts. But if you're going in the draft, Caleb Banks and Lee Hunter are a couple big-bodied guys that could be your eventual replacement for Grover Stewart. Kristen Miller as well from Georgia. Zane Durant is probably a little more of a 3-tech type. But Banks and Hunter and Miller, they're probably all going to go at latest by the time the Colts pick in the second round. It might be able to get like a Zane Durant in the third round there. But it's a decent year to have the needs that the Colts have on the defensive side of the ball up front. Our next question is from our guy Stats Matt on Twitter. Is it possible that all of our defensive linemen going to the same private coach in the offseason could lead to issues? And that's not really anything I've ever considered. But I mean, we could talk about it. So the Colts have several players who go to Eddie McGilvra out in Southern California in the offseason to train. Laiatu Latu goes there. Kwity Paye goes there before he left. Iowa Dangbo. Samson Ebukam goes there. I think even Adetomiwa Adebaware was out there too. So several Colts defensive linemen, current and past, share the same offseason trainer. I don't think that Coach Eddie is really the issue. I think at a certain point, players just have to find a way to develop on their own as well when they get back to the facility, because that's part like Eddie has some really successful guys that he trains as well. Like Khalil Mack is another guy that he trains. So he's got guys who already have street cred in the NFL. So, and I mean, Latu is developing fine. I mean, he's getting along there. He's just maybe not to where you want him to be. Daiwa Dangbo earned a huge contract. I think he had an Achilles this year that ended his season. Ebukam as well, when he got to the Colts, led them in sacks that year and had a really solid year, but then had the Achilles. And then Adebaware, maybe slower to develop, but is coming off a career year. Kwity Paye obviously has never really gotten to where you want him to be. But it's a good discussion point of whether or not them all having the same trainer and somewhat underwhelming has been a problem, but I don't think so, because I think we would know if the Colts defensive coaching staff had to kind of unravel all these bad habits and like fix all these issues that these guys were having in the offseason from their coach. I think we would know if that was a big problem. And I don't think it is. I think it's probably just a coincidence. And for what it's worth, McGilvra got hired at a college position. I forget which school, but the school he got hired to like led their conference in sacks and tackles for loss this year. So I think he's much more of a benefit than he is a hindrance. I again just think it's a little bit of a coincidence. This next question from Joshua Brown on Facebook: does winning the AFC South give Chris Ballard another few years, or regardless of what happens, is this Ballard's final year? It feels like the latter. I don't think that winning the division just automatically gives Ballard a few years, but I think winning the division easily saves his job for this year and maybe the next, because it shows true growth and, in his ability to be the lead personnel decision maker and find talent. But I think everything is in the details. It depends on how it looks. The Colts were able to kind of hang their downfall on injuries this year. I think that's kind of the main thing in the building, that they believe that injuries were the biggest issue, but maybe they didn't have the depth needed to step up and fix those problems when they did crop up. I also don't think that this is maybe a lame duck year for Ballard no matter what. Because again, if they win the division, if they make the playoffs, I think he's probably bought himself another year. It just kind of depends how it all looks at the end. Like, do they clunk their way into the playoffs? That's a plus because they're in the playoffs, but do they look like a really unconvincing squad? That's kind of a question for 11 months down the road, I would say. And then this last one is from Mo on Twitter. Last one of this segment: is Jalen Jones an underrated trade or cut candidate? You could get $3.6 million in savings for a player that doesn't fit Lou. That's a good one. Zach and I have focused more so on the really expensive guys, DeForest Buckner, Pittman, extending Quentin Nelson, those ones where you can recoup 10, 15, $20 million. But Jones, I think, makes all the sense in the world. There's guys like Anthony Richardson and Jalen Jones and maybe even Tyre Franklin, for what it's worth, who you look at last year and maybe they just did not fit what the Colts are doing, moving in the direction that they are going. Jones I would be really surprised if he returned. He's a guy that started both of the last 2 years for you, and then suddenly he's got to fight for scraps for playing time last year, even when he was healthy. I just don't think he's maybe in their plans, but I mean, he's a good player somewhere else. If you go somewhere else that's more, zone coverage or maybe not as reliant on the speed factor at corner, then like maybe you get something for Jones. But I do think he's probably someone that gets traded for like a 6th-round pick or something this offseason. So that is it for this segment, guys. But don't worry, you had way more questions for us. And like usual, we might have to spill it into a second episode. But for now, we will continue some of the offseason talk in just a moment. All right, let's be real. No one starts a business for the joy of calculating tax withholdings or managing payroll spreadsheets, but that's where Gusto comes in to take the stress out of payroll, benefits, and HR so that you can focus on running your business and supporting your team. Gusto is the all-in-one remote-friendly payroll and HR platform that makes managing your team simple, transparent, and fast. Whether you're hiring, onboarding, or paying employees, Gusto helps you do it all from one place without the hassle or hidden fees. Unlimited payroll runs for one monthly price, which means no surprise charges at the end of the month. Gusto's automated tools like offer letters, onboarding materials, and direct deposits save hours every week. And knowing that you can reach certified HR experts anytime gives you real peace of mind. So try Gusto today at gusto.com/LockedOnNFL and get 3 months free when you run your first payroll. That's right, 3 months of free payroll at gusto.com/LockedOnNFL. One more time, that's gusto.com/LockedOnNFL. All right, guys, and it's the last call for football on FanDuel. One final Sunday, one last kickoff. The final chance to get it in on the action before the NFL season officially comes to a close. This is Super Bowl 60, and FanDuel is making sure that you're right in the middle of it with a special offer just in time for the biggest game of the year. Whether you're backing the favorite, riding with the underdog, or building one last same-game parlay, this is the game that everyone's been waiting for. This is where predictions turn into plays, stats turn into storylines, and every snap feels a little bigger. It's the perfect way to cap off the season and make the Super Bowl even more exciting from kickoff to the final whistle. If you're a new customer, then you could bet just $5 and you'll get $200 in bonus bets if you win. So make it count, because after the Super Bowl, the season's over. Last call for football on FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of Super Bowl 60. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. All right, everyone. Thanks for making Locked On Colts your first listen of the day. And thank you for making Locked On the #1 podcast network in sports. If you haven't already, go check out our new Everydayer Clubs. You could catch our audio ad-free and get an invite to the members-only Locked On Everydayer Club Discord server, which includes a group chat just for listeners of our show. Go to lockedoncolts.supercast.com to join or even gift a subscription. Zach and I are having a lot of fun chatting with people in there. So if you haven't already, go ahead and hop in there so we could chat with you. Take it from the show. It always rolls back over to the chat, and then you know what? Everything goes there. It's not always just football questions. All right. So, what are your predictions for Alec Pierce's contract, and how do the Colts make it work under the salary cap? Whether it's cuts, restructures, trades, what have you. That's from MGLP on Blue Sky. So I think Pierce is probably going to get 3 or 4 years around $25 million, if I had to guess. So that's 3 years, 75, 4 years, $100 million. That's what makes the most sense to me. I think 20 million is probably a little low. That's per year, by the way. 20 million per year is probably a little low because that's what the market would have been like 3 or 4 years ago, maybe. But now for a guy who's coming off his first 1,000-yard year, has led the NFL in yards per catch 2 years running, it's going to be a hefty price tag. Now, I don't think it's going to be like 30 million because that's reserved for guys who are like actual top receivers, not only on their team, but they're considered like kind of the best, top 10, top 12 or so players in the sport. Now, of course, free agency always makes guys, it bloats their value a little bit. But Pierce hasn't quite shown enough as a complete receiver quite yet. to really earn that, because he's not like a yards after catch guy. You don't do a ton with him underneath in the short to intermediate. He's mostly chunk plays. Now, he's been developing as a player, as a more complete receiver, but there's still some stuff he's got to show you. Now, maybe a team gets really desperate and they say, we think you're going to develop in this all-around complete guy that you never have to take off the field and you can do every single thing that a receiver does, and they give him way more than what the Colts are willing to. But for now, I don't quite think that's going to happen. Now, this is basically the Alec Pierce portion of the show, because you guys had a lot of questions about that. If Alec Pierce gets an offer that he can't refuse, then what's the plan? Just to pay Michael Pittman and figure it out? That is from Jared in the Everydayers Club. So Michael Pittman Jr. is due to be like a $29 million cap hit next year. And that's even higher than what, again, we project Alec Pierce to make. And it's just, I don't feel like the Colts are the type of team that could be paying two receivers that type of money. The Bengals can do it with Jamar Chase and T. Higgins because they've seen that's kind of the engine that drives their team. But we've seen Michael Pittman Jr. and Alec Pierce for 4 years. That's not what makes the Colts potent necessarily. Now, when they're both at the top of their game, that certainly makes the Colts offense really, really good. But the quarterback matters. Jonathan Taylor matters. The offensive line matters. That's far more what matters to the Colts rather than a team like the Bengals. So, yeah, if Alec Pierce does not wind up being with the Colts in 2026, then I think you just move forward with Michael Pittman Jr. I think you still try and restructure that contract because, again, $29 million is the seventh highest cap hit for a receiver in the NFL. And, you love Michael Pittman Jr., but I just don't think he's quite given you that value. So you do that. I don't know if you sign someone in free agency, but I think you probably wind up spending one of your first couple picks on a receiver that could stretch the field. There are some decent guys out there. Malachi Fields from Notre Dame is someone who I think could do a lot of that. He's about 6'4", 220 or so. Really good speed, had a good week at the Senior Bowl. And I think he could maybe offer you a more well-rounded base as a receiver than what Pierce has ultimately grown into. So eventually maybe Fields could be a more complete all-around receiver, but make no mistake, losing Alec Pierce would be a big problem for the Colts. Now, this next one is from David on Twitter. Name a contract that you wouldn't give Alec Pierce. Exactly how high does it need to be? So we're at the point now where I looked at the numbers recently. I think it's like 25 receivers making more than $20 million a year, which I'm comfortable giving Pierce more than 20 per year. But I think it's only 9 guys that make 30 or more. I wouldn't want to touch 30 or more for Pierce. If it gets to like 26, 27 per year, I get it. You kind of have to do that to retain your guy. He's very important to what the Colts do, and he's the best at what he does in the NFL, arguably. So if you get to like 26 or 27, it's expensive, but I guess it's fine. But if you start to get like 28 million per year, 29 million, 30 million per year for Pierce, I think you kind of have to just cut your losses at that point. As crappy as it is, you can't just give Pierce a blank check because you're already kind of going to do that with Daniel Jones. Pierce, I mean, you've had him for 4 years now, and you haven't won anything. So at a certain point, no one on this roster is worth a diamond. You know what I mean? Because there's no one on this roster that's really accomplished anything in the postseason with the Colts. So that sounds like I'm really diminishing these guys' value, and I don't mean to do that, but like it would be one thing if the Colts were a perennial playoff team and you have a player who's super critical to what they do, who's going to be hitting the market. That's not the case with the Colts. Like the Colts are closer to probably needing to hit the reset button than they are competing for the Super Bowl. So at a certain point, everybody has too high of an asking price, I would say. This next question is from the Insider Program. With the increased salary cap, do you think that the Colts can keep both Daniel Jones and Alec Pierce? So this is in reference to the salary cap recently jumping this coming year. anywhere from like $22 to $26 million to be over $300 million for a team. So I think the Colts were going to find a way to keep Jones and Pierce regardless. Again, unless Pierce just got some astronomical figure. But Jones, I think, is by any means necessary for them. It certainly makes it easier, the increase in salary cap, to keep both players. But I think they're still going to have to do some finagling of their cap. Again, Pittman, $29 million against the cap. DeForest Buckner is a $20+ million per year guy coming off a neck injury at 32. Do you rework that deal at all? Mooney Ward, is he going to retire? He's a $20 million per year guy. You save about $5 million if you move off Zaire Franklin. Quentin Nelson is $20+ million per year. You want to keep around, obviously, but do you go ahead and give him an extension because he's going into the final year of his contract, and then you move some of the salary cap hit down the road a little bit? So I definitely still think they have some working of the cap to do regardless of this jumping, just to give them some flexibility. And then the last one, actually, no, I lied. The last one about Jones, at least here, it's from Theo Zacher on Twitter. Where do you rank Daniel Jones among the other free agent quarterbacks this year? So this is just going to go to show you how the Colts really need to have Daniel Jones return despite the Achilles injury. So I would probably rank Jones as the top quarterback available on the market this year based on what we saw in the first half of the season and the kind of the synergy he has with Shane Steichen and the rest of the Colts offense when it's actually humming and they're healthy. Because after Jones, you're looking at Malik Willis, Aaron Rodgers, Russell Wilson, Joe Flacco, Marcus Mariota, Kenny Pickett, Tyrod Taylor, Carson Wentz, Trey Lance. Does anyone want to go down those roads? I don't think so. So even if it's going to take you like $40 million per year on Jones, which is a little rich for my blood given the Achilles, the Colts might have to make that happen. And then, okay, so the last one for this segment, will the Colts prioritize Nick Cross this offseason behind Daniel Jones and Alec Pierce? If not, how do they fill the gap? Do the Colts officially become the laughingstock of the NFL if they do let Alec Pierce walk? That is from Bo Connor on Facebook. So let's tackle the Nick Cross of it all first. He's probably your next priority, at least among the somewhat expensive guys behind Daniel Jones and Alec Pierce. Zach and I have discussed this. It's all about the cap figure or the dollar figure for Cross. If you're getting much north of $10 million per year for Cross, it's kind of hard to justify. It's been a very good player, very, very good box safety. But there's just some stuff he leaves out on the field there in coverage. Whenever there's like a blown coverage or something, and especially in the red zone, it usually feels like Cross is kind of tied to it. And to be making those kind of critical mistakes, that's giving up points. If you're giving that guy that kind of money, you'd love to see those mistakes kind of disappear. But I don't know that does yet. But Cross is still a young, ascending player, despite this being going into his second contract. I certainly think it's better to have Cross than it is to not have him. But again, if you're getting too crazy with the cap figure, I think you just kind of have to cut your losses there. Now, how do they fill the gap? This draft does have some pretty good safeties in it. The safety market in free agency is usually relatively cheap if you're not going big game hunting. Like Trevon Moehrig last year got like $17 million per year, which that might be what you're looking at with Nick Cross on the open market if another team falls in love with him. But you can get playable safeties for like minimal dollars, like $5 million per year or less, to be quite honest with you. I mean, Julian Blackmon kept coming back once or twice for cheap figures, and then his deal with the Saints. So you could get playable safeties for cheap, but you might want to look at the draft. There's some pretty good guys out there. Bud Clark from TCU is a guy that I really like. Emmanuel McNeil-Warren from Toledo, Dylan Tianneman from Oregon. There's some pretty good players out there. Jalen Stroman, Notre Dame, VJ Payne, Kansas State. So you could spend a pick in the first 3 or 4 rounds on a safety and probably get him to start for you pretty quickly. And that's not even mentioning that Hunter Wooler could come back from his Liz Frank and be healthy enough to play and start. Because I think the Colts would be comfortable, once healthy, giving Hunter Wooler the role of dime linebacker who's going to play 500 snaps, or even your starting strong safety next to Cam Bynum. So if Wooler's healthy, I think that kind of answers your question right there. All right, guys, we're going to finish this up in just a moment with a couple more draft-related questions. And, tight end has actually entered the chat here. This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. February can be a lot. Flowers, candy, stuffed animals, and so much talk about relationships. And it can honestly feel like everyone else has it all together in their love life. But here's the truth. Whether you're married, dating, single, or just focusing on you, most people are still figuring it out. And no matter where you are in your romantic journey, therapy can help you find your way. It can help you get clear on what you want, what feels heavy, and how to take some pressure off yourself. It's easy to assume that everyone else has their perfect relationship, but most people are working through something at least. Therapy can help you recognize patterns that might be weighing relationships down. It can help you communicate better, set healthier boundaries, and stop carrying everything alone. And even if you're not in a relationship right now, therapy can help you feel more confident in what you want moving forward. The biggest thing, it reminds you that you're not behind, you're right on time. BetterHelp has licensed therapists in the US, and they do the initial matching work for you so that you can focus on your goals. And if you want to switch therapists, you can do that at any time. Sign up and get 10% off at betterhelp.com/lockedon. That's BetterHelp.com/lockedon. All right, guys, and tax season does not have to take over your life. I know for those of us that do our own taxes, it can be the most stressful time of year. But you know what? It doesn't have to be that big a deal. To me, it's kind of the thing I work up in my head to be this boogeyman, or it's going to take a million years to do. And once you're done with it, it really was never that bad. But this year, TurboTax is making it easier than ever to just hand things off and move on with your day. With TurboTax full service, you can have your taxes done for you by a trusted local expert, start to finish, without the stress or guesswork. Instead of spending hours trying to figure out forms, you can meet with a local TurboTax expert in person or connect online. They handle everything from W-2s to self-employed forms and work to get you every deduction. You can upload your documents, go about your day, and get updates right in the TurboTax app. It's a huge time saver, and it gives real peace of mind knowing that an expert is handling it. For a limited time, you can have your taxes done by a local TurboTax expert for just $150 all in if a TurboTax expert didn't file it for you last year. So just file by February 28th. Take taxes off your plate and get back to your life. Visit TurboTax.com/local to book your appointment today. All right, welcome back to Locked On Colts, everybody. We are finishing off this special Q&A episode, and there's some really good ones here. These last couple questions had me doing a little more research than normal. So this first one is from Ethan Callahan on Facebook, who's always asking really good questions, by the way. Could Eric Gentry be the first of the inevitable evolution of linebackers who can match up against tight ends? He's super raw, but he's a unicorn. So Gentry's very interesting. It caused me to kind of go look at what his draft stock was this year, because if you look at what he can offer you and his upside, he's an early pick. But the reality of what he's put out there on tape so far is why he's considered a day 3, round 5, 6, 7 pick. I've even seen him as UDFA option. So he is a USC linebacker by way of Arizona State, I believe. He's like 6'6", just over 220 pounds, really good length. Had a good week at the Shrine Bowl, but essentially he's kind of like Isaiah Simmons, where he's that weird matchup chess piece you can have on defense to move him around on tight ends, do whatever you want with him. But I think you're probably going to need to have a plan for him here, because he's almost got like a defensive end size profile if you were to put more bulk on him. But I mean, big linebackers, Lou Anarumo likes that. So as long as he checks the speed box and bulks up a little bit to be more physical, and he could be, a mismatch kind of guy if you want to do that. So Eric Gentry is very, very interesting. I want to see I don't know if he's going to be invited to the combine or not, since he's kind of considered lower down the totem pole. But for the Colts, I would be intrigued for them to take a day 3 swing on him. Again, a linebacker who's like 6'6", hopefully is going to be at minimum 225 by the time he gets to you. I think last I saw was 221. Good length, good athleticism in general. He is a unicorn, like you mentioned, but there's reasons obviously why he's not considered a high pick right now. But if some of those things are put to rest, I would be intrigued by him. And then this next one is from at JDMBA Pastor 5172 on YouTube. What type of player do you think the Colts are looking for as a potential Mo Alley-Cox Drew Ogletree replacement at tight end 2? Would they want more of a wing F tight end or an attached on the line Y tight end? Should that be addressed in free agency or the draft? Are there any guys that you particularly like? In free agency, this listener is a fan of Cade Otton, Charlie Kolar, and Chig Okonkwo. In the draft, he said he likes Eli Raridan and Michael Trigg. So those are some good ones. Honestly, I think the Colts' first priority at tight end 2 is probably going to be Mo Alley-Cox. I think they would try to get either Mo and or Ogletree back. I think they like them a lot. I don't think they're guys who they're necessarily trying to move on from, and I don't think they're going to be that expensive. So I would imagine at least one of those guys is going to return. Now, if you're looking at the free agent market, there's not a ton I like out there. I could be very picky when it comes to free agency, but that's just me. So you want someone that can block. I would probably look for someone who is more of an inline kind of player, someone who does at least some of what Mo Alley-Cox gives you. Like Durham Smythe is someone who I've always really liked, played for the Dolphins for a while. I think he most recently was with the Bears. But in the draft, if you're going to get someone with a little upside who could block and maybe give you something behind Tyler Warren, again, I think they'll probably go for someone who's capable of blocking and playing on the line a little more often because you got Will Mallory. You've already got your joker tight end, the catch-only tight end. But Texas A&M has a guy, Nate Bokercher, that I really like. He had a good week in Mobile, made some tough catches, could get it up the seam, has decent athleticism. Same thing for Alabama's Joshua Cuevas and Stanford's Sam Roush. Those are all guys who I would trust to block a little bit, at least. But I also don't think they're totally useless as pass catchers either. Because I don't really love tight ends who are just one thing or the other. I like them to at least be able to do a little bit of everything. Whether that's blocking or just receiving. Those guys it feels like they hardly ever see the field, especially if they don't play special teams. So I like a guy who can offer you a little bit of everything. So for me, probably in the draft is where I would go. All right, guys. Well, we did it again. Another good Q&A episode. We'll be back with you later for the daily show. We've got something lined up with the guys at Sumer Sports out there. They're on Radio Row at the Super Bowl, so I think Zach is going to be talking with them later. Thanks again for tuning in to Locked On Colts, making us your first listen of the day. Again, we'll be back later today and tomorrow as well. If you didn't already check out the Locked On Colts squad show from last night, it was a good one, of course. Make sure you subscribe and follow Locked On Colts right now so that you get all the latest episodes. If you don't already, follow at Locked On Colts, at Jake Arthur NFL, and at Zach Hicks 2 on social media. If you never miss an episode, then remember, the Everydayer Club is built just for you. Get Locked On Colts ad-free audio, plus members-only Discord access, and more. Just head to lockedoncolts.supercast.com to join the club today. And with that, you guys have an awesome day.